terrible that someone could go through that, and then to know that they probably went through it by themselves and not had me or her brother or my husband or anyone that she knew that could be there, you know, at a time like this.
So I wasn't going to stop until I find out who did this to my daughter.
What if the person you trusted most was plotting your murder? For 20-year-old Kania Brunson, this nightmare became reality when the secret relationship she thought would bring happiness instead led to her brutal death. On September the 24th, 2022, in a quiet Milwaukee alley, police made a horrifying discovery. A young woman's body, bound, shot, and set ablaze, abandoned like discarded trash near Keefe Avenue and Palmer Street. The remains belonged to Kania Brunson, a vibrant cosmology student with dreams that would never be realized. Kania's story isn't just another headline. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly passion can turn to violence, how trust can become a weapon, and how the people closest to us sometimes pose the greatest danger. Before she became a victim, Kania was a beacon of positivity in her community. Her infectious laugh-filled beauty school classrooms, her ambitious plans inspired friends, her talent promised a bright future. But beneath this hopeful exterior lay a dangerous secret, a relationship with a much older, married man whose jealousy and rage would ultimately extinguish her light forever. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to kill a person they claim to love? Or what warning signs might have been missed along the way? Kania's tragedy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about relationships, power, and the human capacity for both love and unimaginable cruelty. This isn't just another crime story. It's a vital lesson in recognizing danger before it's too late. Every relationship leaves clues, every murderer shows signs, and every victim deserves to have their story told. If you want to understand how everyday relationships can turn deadly, subscribe now. These stories could save lives, maybe even yours. The brutal truth about Kania Brunson's murder might be difficult to hear, but ignoring these realities won't make them disappear. Before tragedy struck, Kania Brunson embodied the promise of youth. Friends described her as magnetic, someone whose smile could instantly brighten any room she entered. At just 20 years old, she approached life with an infectious enthusiasm that drew people toward her, natural warmth and generosity. Growing up in Milwaukee, Kania exhibited creativity and compassion from an early age. Her initial career aspirations reflected this duality. She contemplated becoming an orthodontist, envisioning how she might transform people's smiles and confidence. She also considered veterinary medicine, showing her tender heart for caring for vulnerable beings who couldn't speak for themselves. Have you ever felt that pull between multiple passions, searching for the one that truly speaks to your soul? Kania experienced this journey before, ultimately finding her calling in cosmetology school. There, her artistic flair flourished as she mastered techniques to help others look and feel their best. Classmates remember her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering determination to perfect her craft. The bond between Kania and her mother, Jennifer Meadows, stood as a cornerstone in her life. Unlike many mother-daughter relationships strained by adolescent rebellion, theirs thrived on mutual respect and genuine friendship. Jennifer wasn't just a parent, but a confidant who celebrated her daughter's victories and provided comfort during setbacks. Their connection represented the kind of healthy relationship that should have set the standard for Kania's expectations. Her grandmother, Charlene Litzler, often spoke of how Kania's presence transformed family gatherings. Her youthful energy and heartfelt interest in others' lives made her beloved across generations. Family members recall how she would listen intently to their stories, offering perspective beyond her years. Evenings spent practicing makeup techniques with friends, weekends filled with laughter, and dreams of opening her own salon someday. These ordinary moments now haunt those who loved her. The future Kania envisioned included financial independence, creative fulfillment, and eventually starting a family of her own. Have you considered how the seemingly mundane dreams we hold can be so tragically fragile? How the simple desire for love and connection can lead some down destructive paths? As Kania navigated early adulthood, balancing school responsibilities with personal relationships, no one could have predicted how dramatically her life would veer from its promising trajectory. The vibrant young woman with ambitious plans and a supportive family network seemed positioned for success, not destined to become a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in toxic relationships. Sultan Sharif didn't match the profile of someone you'd expect in a young cosmetology student's life. At 55 years old, nearly 3 times Kania's age, he carried a criminal history stretching back to 1989 and wore a wedding ring that should have served as an unmistakable boundary. Yet somehow, this man with a shadowy past managed to insert himself into Kania's bright world. Their paths crossed when Kania was still a teenager, creating an immediate imbalance that would define everything that followed. What began as a tension from an older, established man quickly evolved into something far more insidious. Have you ever witnessed someone's judgment clouded by flattery and false promises, or watched as a friend mistook control for care, possessiveness for passion? The psychological dynamics at play weren't accidental. Sharif methodically positioned himself as a mentor, provider, and romantic interest, roles that allowed him to establish dominance while making Kania increasingly dependent on his approval. This calculated approach represents a textbook pattern of manipulation, where isolation from supportive influences happens so gradually the victim rarely notices until they're deeply entangled. What made an ambitious young woman with family support and promising prospects fall under the influence of such a dangerous individual? The answer lies in understanding how predators identify vulnerability. They offer exactly what someone believes they need, whether that's validation, excitement, financial security, or the illusion of mature love. For Kania, the relationship offered an escape from the ordinary and the misguided feeling of being chosen by someone with supposed wisdom and experience. As months passed, the secretive nature of their affair created a separate reality where normal relationship standards no longer applied. Friends noticed subtle changes in Kania's behavior, cancelled plans, decreased social media activity, vague explanations about her time. These shifts, barely perceptible individually, painted a disturbing picture when viewed collectively. Have you ever ignored red flags because you were emotionally invested, or dismissed your intuition because acknowledging the truth seemed too painful? The precarious balance of their relationship began to fracture as Kania matured. What once felt exciting now registered as controlling. Questions about Sharif's marriage and other potential relationships emerged. The power dynamic, previously accepted without question, increasingly chafed against her growing sense of self-worth and independence. The breaking point came when Kania made a fateful decision. She would contact Sharif's wife. This choice, born from a combination of jealousy, moral awakening, and desire for honesty, shattered the carefully constructed fantasy their relationship had been built upon. For Sultan Sharif, this represented more than betrayal. It threatened his carefully compartmentalized life, his marriage, his reputation, and potentially his freedom. As tension escalated between them, neither could have predicted how quickly resentment would transform into rage and ultimately into calculated murder. The very relationship that once made Kania feel special was now the greatest threat to her existence. The decision to contact Sherry's wife marked a point of no return. For Kania, it represented a moral awakening, a stand against the deception that had become the foundation of their relationship. For Sharif, it meant exposure, humiliation, and potentially devastating consequences in both his marriage and community standing. Messages began flying between them, each more heated than the last. Witnesses later described seeing Kania and Sharif engaged in arguments across various locations in Milwaukee. One friend recalled Kania appearing increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to September 2022, checking her phone constantly and declining to elaborate when asked what was troubling her. "I just need to handle something," she reportedly told a classmate just days before her death. "It'll be over soon." How many times have similar words been spoken by individuals who never suspected the danger they were in? Have you ever minimized a threatening situation, thinking you could manage it alone rather than seeking help? Text records revealed the escalating nature of their exchanges. What began as Kania's demands for honesty evolved into Sharif's attempts to regain control through alternating tactics of charm, guilt, and veiled threats. The psychological warfare intensified as Sharif realized his usual manipulation strategies were no longer working. A particularly revealing exchange occurred on September 22nd, just 2 days before the murder. Kania messaged, "I can't keep living like this. Your wife deserves to know the truth." Sharif's response, "You don't understand what you're doing. Some things can't be undone." Those prophetic words now hang heavy with menace, but at the time, Kania interpreted them as merely another attempt to maintain secrecy. Friends noticed her seeming distracted during classes, stepping outside to take calls and cancelling social plans. The isolation that had been gradually increasing throughout their relationship reached its peak during these final days. As tensions mounted, Sharif's behavior showed classic signs of someone contemplating violence. He withdrew money from multiple ATMs. He made unusual purchases, including duct tape and accelerant, items that would later feature prominently in the crime. He contacted his brother-in-law, Johnny Hopgood, for what he described as help with the situation. September 24th began as an ordinary Saturday. Kania attended a morning class, posted a selfie online, and told her mother she had plans that evening but would be home later. Security footage captured her entering a convenience store at 2:47 p.m., appearing calm but distracted. This would be the last time she was seen alive on camera. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Sharif's distinctive vehicle parked in unusual locations throughout the day. One described seeing Kania enter the car around 5 p.m., noting that the interaction seemed tense but not immediately alarming. Another reported hearing raised voices from inside the vehicle approximately 30 minutes later. The fatal meeting had been orchestrated under the pretense of talking things through, a common tactic used by abusers to isolate their victims. What Kania likely believed would be a difficult but necessary conversation was, in reality, a carefully planned trap. By evening, Sharif had driven to a secluded area where privacy served not as protection for an intimate conversation, but as cover for unspeakable violence. The particular cruelty of this betrayal lies in how it exploited Kania's belief that, despite everything, a peaceful resolution remained possible. If this story resonates with you, consider what warning signs might exist in relationships around you. In the moment before violence erupted, Kania still didn't recognize the mortal danger she faced. Because we rarely expect those who claim to love us to become our executioners. The confrontation that had been building for weeks was about to reach its horrifying conclusion, transforming a relationship dispute into one of Milwaukee's most disturbing homicides of 2022. As twilight descended over Milwaukee, on September 24th, the confrontation between Kania and Sharif reached its breaking point. What transpired inside his vehicle would later be pieced together through forensic evidence, witness statements, and Sharif's eventual incriminating admission. Kania entered Sharif's car believing conversation remained possible. Instead, according to prosecution evidence, she found herself trapped in a meticulously planned ambush. The first sign of mortal danger came when Sharif produced binding materials, restraining Kania while she was still attempting to reason with him. One witness, who lived in an apartment overlooking the parking area where the vehicle was stationed, reported hearing a woman's frantic pleas followed by sudden silence. She kept saying, "Please don't do this," and then there was nothing, the witness later testified. The silence was worse than the screaming. Forensic analysis of the crime scene painted a harrowing picture of Kania's final moments. Evidence suggested she was first restrained with duct tape, the same tape purchased by Sharif days earlier. The confined space of the vehicle became a prison from which escape proved impossible. Then came gunshots, multiple wounds indicating not a momentary loss of control but a deliberate execution. Blood evidence discovered later showed that Kania had attempted to shield herself, raising her bound hands in a final, futile act of self-preservation. Have you considered how quickly familiar surroundings can transform into scenes of horror? How the same hands once claimed to offer protection can become instruments of destruction? The brutality didn't end with the shooting. Recognizing that evidence of his crime remained, Sharif contacted Johnny Hopgood. Phone records showed multiple calls between them, culminating in Hopgood's arrival at the scene. Together, they embarked on an attempt to eliminate all traces of Kania's existence. They transported her body to an alley near Keefe Avenue and Palmer Street, a location seemingly chosen for its seclusion. There they doused her remains with accelerant and ignited a fire meant to destroy evidence and render identification impossible. The flames that consumed Kania's body represented the final indignity in a sequence of increasingly inhumane actions. A nearby resident walking his dog around 9:30 p.m. noticed the unusual glow in the alley and approached, believing it might be a trash fire. What he discovered instead prompted an immediate call to emergency services. First responders arrived to find Kania's body still smoldering, the fire having failed in its intended purpose of complete destruction. The medical examiner would later determine that the gunshots had been fatal. The burning was solely an attempt to conceal the crime. This distinction, while clinically important for the investigation, offered little comfort to a family, soon to learn their daughter had suffered not just murder, but desecration. As police secured the scene, Sharif and Hopgood had already separated, each returning to their normal lives as though the evening had contained nothing extraordinary. Sharif went home to his wife, the very woman whose discovery of his infidelity he had worked so violently to prevent. Hopgood stopped for fast food before returning to his residence. The casual nature of these actions following such extreme violence speaks to a chilling disconnection from the gravity of their deeds. By midnight, as investigators carefully documented the crime scene, Kania's mother was already calling hospitals and friends, concerned by her daughter's uncharacteristic failure to return home or respond to messages. The investigation into Kania Brunson's murder began, as many do, with a body and countless questions. Milwaukee Police Department detectives arrived at the alley scene with limited information, but quickly recognized the case required immediate, comprehensive attention. Medical examiners made a preliminary identification through dental records, while forensics teams collected trace evidence from the partially burned remains. Despite the fire damage, investigators recovered bullet fragments and binding materials that would later prove crucial in building their case. The breakthrough came within 48 hours. After obtaining Kania's phone records, detectives identified a pattern of communication with Sultan Sharif. The frequency and timing of their exchanges, particularly the intense concentration of messages in the days before her death, immediately elevated him to prime suspect status. Simultaneously, area surveillance footage underwent thorough review. Multiple cameras captured Sharif's vehicle at strategic locations near Kania's last known whereabouts, in proximity to the alley where her body was discovered, and at a gas station where he purchased fuel later determined to match the accelerant used on her body. Have you ever considered how the everyday technology surrounding us creates an almost inescapable digital footprint? How actions meant to remain hidden leave traces across countless systems? The investigation accelerated when a resident came forward with crucial information. Living in an apartment overlooking one of the locations where Sharif's car had been parked, this witness reported seeing a struggle inside the vehicle and hearing alarming sounds. More importantly, they had taken cell phone video showing portions of the car with its distinctive features clearly visible. With mounting evidence pointing toward Sharif, detectives executed search warrants on his residence and vehicles on September 27th. The results proved devastating to any claims of innocence. Despite attempts to clean the interior, forensic technicians detected blood traces in his car that later matched Kania's DNA profile. Additionally, they recovered a partially burned receipt for duct tape, matching the kind used to bind Kania. Cell phone location data provided the final pieces of the puzzle. Both Sharif's and Hopgood's mobile devices placed them at critical locations throughout the evening of September 24th, creating an irrefutable timeline of their movements. The pattern showed them converging at the scene of the initial attack, traveling together to the alley and then separating afterward. When confronted with this evidence, Hopgood broke first. Facing potential charges as an accomplice to murder, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His statement confirmed the essential narrative investigators had assembled, while adding disturbing details about Sharif's calculated approach to the crime. According to Hopgood's testimony, Sharif had contacted him claiming he needed help with a situation, but revealed the true nature of this situation only after the murder had already occurred. Though Hopgood maintained he wasn't present during the actual killing, he admitted to assisting with transporting and burning Kania's body, actions for which he expressed remorse during subsequent court proceedings. Armed with Hopgood's testimony and substantial forensic evidence, investigators arrested Sultan Sharif on October 3, 2022. During questioning, Sharif initially claimed no knowledge of Kania's fate, then attempted to suggest their relationship had been merely casual. The mountain of evidence contradicting these claims ultimately led to his indictment on charges of first-degree intentional homicide and mutilating a corpse. Throughout this meticulous investigation, detectives maintained close contact with Kania's family, walking the delicate line between providing information and shielding them from the most disturbing details of their daughter's final moments. The case against Sultan Sharif moved swiftly through the judicial system. On November 10, 2022, he was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide and mutilating a corpse, the most severe charges possible under Wisconsin law. His brother-in-law, Johnny Hopgood, faced lesser but still significant charges of helping to conceal a crime and obstruction of justice. The evidence presented during preliminary hearings left little room for doubt. Prosecutors methodically laid out the timeline, supported by surveillance footage, cell phone records, DNA evidence, and witness testimony. The defense initially attempted to portray the relationship between Sharif and Kania as mutually volatile, suggesting the events represented a tragic escalation rather than premeditated murder. This strategy collapsed when forensic experts testified about the binding materials used on Kania's wrists and ankles. The presentation of purchase records showing Sharif acquiring these materials days before the murder directly contradicted any claim of spontaneous violence. Additional testimony regarding the calculated disposal of her remains further undermined any suggestion that this was an impulsive act. The trial finally commenced in December 2023, after several procedural delays. Court observers noted Sharif's impassive demeanor throughout the proceedings, even as graphic crime scene evidence was presented. By contrast, Kania's family members displayed profound emotional distress, with several needing to temporarily leave the courtroom during particularly detailed testimony. Johnny Hopgood, having secured a plea agreement in exchange for his testimony, provided damning first-hand account of Sharif's actions after the murder. He described Sharif's chilling calmness while discussing how to dispose of Kania's body and his apparent lack of remorse in the aftermath. After 5 days of testimony, the jury received the case on December 15th. They deliberated for just 45 minutes before returning with a unanimous guilty verdict on all charges. The brevity of their deliberations spoke volumes about the overwhelming nature of the evidence presented. At the sentencing hearing in February 2024, Judge Marilyn Townsend addressed Sharif directly. The calculated nature of this crime, followed by the tremendous disrespect shown to Ms. Brunson's remains, demonstrates a profound disregard for human life. Society must be protected from such behavior. She then delivered the maximum sentence, life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murder charge, with an additional 15 years for corpse mutilation. Hopgood received a 15-year sentence, with possibility of parole after serving 60% of his term in accordance with his cooperation agreement. As Sharif was led from the courtroom, Kania's family embraced each other, finding a measure of closure in the knowledge that justice, at least in legal terms, had been served. The courtroom proceedings, while necessary for justice, represented only a fraction of the ongoing ordeal faced by those who loved Kania. For her family, the pain of her absence permeated every aspect of daily life, creating a void that legal outcomes could never fill. Kania Brunson, Kania's father, delivered a victim impact statement that left many in the courtroom struggling with emotion. "My daughter was sunshine in human form," he said, his voice breaking. "She brought light into every room, and now that light has been extinguished forever. No parent should have to select a casket for their child. No father should have to help carry his daughter to her final resting place." The raw power of his words captured the essence of parental grief, a pain so profound it defies conventional description. For Kania, the loss manifested physically as well as emotionally, with friends noting visible changes in his appearance and demeanor in the months following Kania's death. Jennifer Meadows, Kania's mother, spoke of the daily struggles that followed her daughter's murder. "I still find myself picking up the phone to call her," she shared during a community remembrance event. "I see something that would make her laugh, and for a split second I forget she's gone. Then the reality crashes back, and I have to learn to breathe again." The particular cruelty of Kania's death, its violence and deliberate nature, added layers to the family's grieving process. Questions of whether she suffered, what her final thoughts might have been, and if anything could have prevented the tragedy, haunted them relentlessly. Charlene Litzler, Kania's grandmother, channeled her grief into preserving her granddaughter's memory. "They took her body, but they can't take what she meant to us," she stated firmly. "Every time I share stories about her kindness, her determination, her beautiful spirit, she lives on through those memories." For Kania's siblings and extended family, the aftermath brought complicated emotions: guilt for continuing their lives, anger at the senselessness of her death and fear that their memories of her might fade with time. Family gatherings, once joyful occasions where Kania's energy brightened the room, became bittersweet reminders of her absence. Beyond the emotional toll, practical challenges emerged. The financial burden of funeral expenses, therapy costs, and time away from work created additional stresses during an already unbearable period. Community fundraising efforts helped ease these burdens, but the economic impact of sudden, traumatic loss often extends far beyond initial support. This reality underscores an uncomfortable truth about violent crime. Its effects ripple outward indefinitely, touching lives far beyond the immediate victim. For Kania's family, justice brought acknowledgement but not healing. Their journey through grief continues long after media attention fades and court proceedings conclude. If this story moves you to reflect on those you love, consider reaching out to them today. In the face of tragedy, we're reminded how fragile life truly is and how precious our connections become. Milwaukee reacted to Kania's murder with a combination of horror, outrage, and collective soul-searching. Local news coverage initially focused on the shocking nature of the crime itself, but conversation quickly shifted toward the broader implications for community safety and relationship violence prevention. Vigils held throughout the city drew hundreds of participants, many of whom had never met Kania but felt compelled to stand in solidarity with her family. These gatherings served multiple purposes: honoring her memory, supporting her loved ones, and creating space for difficult conversations about relationship dynamics and violence prevention. What happened to Kania represents our collective failure, stated Pastor Michael Turner during one such event. When anyone among us suffers this kind of fate, we must ask ourselves what signs we missed and what systems failed to protect them. This sentiment echoed across community forums as locals grappled with the realization that the tragedy might have been preventable. Discussion centered around bystander intervention and the responsibility of community members to recognize and respond to warning signs of potentially dangerous relationships. Have you ever noticed concerning behavior in a friend's relationship but remained silent? Or witnessed an argument that seemed excessive but told yourself it wasn't your place to intervene? Local domestic violence prevention organizations reported significant increases in calls following media coverage of Kania's case. Milwaukee's Safe Harbor Center noted a 40% rise in requests for information about age-disparate relationships and controlling behaviors specifically. This surge suggested that, despite its tragedy, Kania's story prompted crucial awareness and potentially life-saving inquiry. Educational institutions throughout the city implemented enhanced programming addressing relationship safety, with several cosmetology schools developing specific curriculum components focused on recognizing signs of control and manipulation. These initiatives acknowledged the particular vulnerability of young adults navigating early relationship experiences. Online community groups formed to discuss preventative measures and support systems for those in potentially dangerous situations. One such group, initiated by a former classmate of Kania's, grew to over 3,000 members within months, creating a network of resources, information, and emotional support for individuals concerned about relationship dynamics. Law enforcement agencies re-examined their response protocols for relationship disputes, with Milwaukee Police Department implementing additional training focused on identifying situations with potential for escalation. This institutional response represented an acknowledgement that systemic improvements could help prevent similar tragedies in the future. Perhaps most importantly, community conversations increasingly centered on personal responsibility, not just for potential victims to recognize danger, but for everyone to create a culture where isolation and control are recognized as unacceptable. Through this lens, Kania's story transformed from merely a cautionary tale into a catalyst for meaningful social change. Kania Brunson never reached her 21st birthday. She never completed cosmetology school, never opened her own salon, never experienced the full measure of her potential. The future that once stretched before her, bright with possibility, was extinguished through an act of calculated violence that continues to echo through countless lives. Yet in the aftermath of this tragedy, something remarkable emerged. Kania's story, her vibrant spirit, her dreams, and, yes, even the circumstances of her death, began reshaping conversations about relationship dynamics, personal safety, and community responsibility. Her memory now serves as both warning and inspiration. The Milwaukee Youth Safety Initiative, established in her honor, provides education and resources to young adults navigating early relationships. The program specifically addresses power imbalances, age disparities, and recognizing controlling behaviors before they escalate. Since its inception, over 2,000 young people have participated in workshops bearing Kania's name and telling her story. Her family, while still navigating the landscape of grief, has found purpose in advocacy. Jennifer Meadows now speaks regularly at schools and community centers, sharing painfully earned wisdom about the warning signs she wishes she had recognized sooner. If even one person leaves an unhealthy relationship because of what happened to my daughter, she says, then Kania's story continues to matter. For those who investigate and prosecute such crimes, the case remains a somber reminder of both the progress made in securing justice and the limitations of that justice to heal the wounds inflicted. Detective Sarah Coleman, who led the investigation, noted, "We can build airtight cases, we can secure maximum sentences, but we can never truly make things right. The best we can do is learn from each tragedy and work to prevent the next one." What can we learn from Kania's story? That relationships built on secrecy often harbor danger. That dramatic age differences frequently mask problematic power dynamics. Those threats, however veiled, should never be dismissed. And perhaps most importantly, that community connections serve as vital safety nets when individuals find themselves in situations they cannot navigate alone. Kania Brunson's life mattered, not just to those who loved her, but to a community forever changed by her absence. In remembering her story, we honor both the vibrant young woman she was and the countless lives that might be saved through the lessons of her tragic death. If her story has affected you, consider how you might apply its lessons in your own life and community. Subscribe for more true crime cases with vital lessons, and share what you believe we as a society can do to prevent such tragedies. Kania's voice was silenced, but through our collective action, her impact continues to resonate.